Punctate flower chafers, Neorhina punctata, Scarabaeidae, mating. Some beetles have intricate mating behavior. Pheromone communication is often important in locating a mate. Different species use different pheromones. Scarab beetles such as the Rutellinae use pheromones derived from fatty acid synthesis, and others use pheromones from organic compounds, while other scarabs such as the Melilondinae use amino acids and terpenoids. Another way beetles find mates is seen in the fireflies, Lampyridae, which are bioluminescent, with abdominal light-producing organs. The males and females engage in a complex dialogue before mating. Each species has a unique combination of flight patterns, duration, composition, and intensity of the light produced. 8. Before mating, males and females may stridulate, or vibrate the objects they are on. In the Meloidae, the male climbs onto the dorsum of the female and strokes his antennae on her head, palps, and antennae. In Eupompha, the male draws his antennae along his longitudinal vertex. They may not mate at all if they do not perform the precopulatory ritual. 8. This mating behavior may be different amongst dispersed populations of the same species. For example, the mating of a Russian population of tansy beetle, Chrysalina graminis, is preceded by an elaborate ritual involving the male tapping the female's eyes, pronotum and antennae with its antennae, which is not evident in the population of this species in the United Kingdom. 85. In another example, the intromittent organ of male thistle tortoise beetles is a long, tube-like structure called the flagellum, which is thin and curved. When not in use, the flagellum is stored inside the abdomen of the male and can extend out to be longer than the male when needed. During mating, this organ bends to the complex shape of the female reproductive organ, which includes a coiled duct that the male must penetrate with the organ. Furthermore, these physical properties of the thistle tortoise beetle have been studied because the ability of a thin, flexible structure to harden without buckling or rupturing is mechanically challenging and may have important implications for the development of microscopic catheters in modern medicine. 86. Competition can play a part in the mating rituals of species such as burying beetles, Nicrophorus, the insects fighting to determine which can mate. Many male beetles are territorial and fiercely defend their territories from intruding males. In such species, the male often has horns on the head or thorax, making its body length greater than that of a female. Copulation is generally quick, but in some cases lasts for several hours. During copulation, sperm cells are transferred to the female to fertilize the egg. 7. Life cycle. The life cycle of the stag beetle includes 3 instars. Egg. Essentially all beetles lay eggs, though some Myrmecophilus Aleocarinae and some Chrysomelinae which live in mountains or the subarctic are ovoviviparous, laying eggs which hatch almost immediately. 83. Beetle eggs generally have smooth surfaces and are soft, though the Cupetidae have hard eggs. Eggs vary widely between species. The eggs tend to be small in species with many instars, larval stages, and in those that lay large numbers of eggs. A female may lay from several dozen to several thousand eggs during her lifetime, depending on the extent of parental care. This ranges from the simple laying of eggs under a leaf, to the parental care provided by scarab beetles, which house, feed and protect their young. The Adelabeidae roll leaves and lay their eggs inside the roll for protection. 887. Larva. The larva is usually the principal feeding stage of the beetle life cycle. Larvae tend to feed voraciously once they emerge from their eggs. Some feed externally on plants, such as those of certain leaf beetles, while others feed within their food sources. Examples of internal feeders are most buprestid and longhorn beetles. The larvae of many beetle families are predatory like the adults, ground beetles, ladybirds, rove beetles. The larval period varies between species, but can be as long as several years. The larvae of skin beetles undergo a degree of reverse development when starved, and later grow back to the previously attained level of maturity. The cycle can be repeated many times, see biological immortality. 88. Larval morphology is highly varied amongst species, with well-developed and sclerotized heads, distinguishable thoracic and abdominal segments, usually the 10th, though sometimes the 8th or 9th. 7. Scarabaeiform larva of Hercules beetle. Beetle larvae can be differentiated from other insect larvae by their hardened, often darkened heads, the presence of chewing mouthparts, and spiracles along the sides of their bodies. Like adult beetles, the larvae are varied in appearance, particularly between beetle families. Beetles with somewhat flattened, highly mobile larvae include the ground beetles and rove beetles. Their larvae are described as campodiform. Some beetle larvae resemble hardened worms with dark head capsules and minute legs. These are elateriform larvae, and are found in the click beetle Elateridae and darkling beetle Tenebrionidae families. Some elateriform larvae of click beetles are known as wireworms. Beetles in the Scarabaeidae have short, thick larvae described as Scarabaeiform, more commonly known as grubs. 89. All beetle larvae go through several instars, which are the developmental stages between each molt. In many species, the larvae simply increase in size with each successive instar as more food is consumed. In some cases, however, more dramatic changes occur. Among certain beetle families or genera, particularly those that exhibit parasitic lifestyles, the first instar, the Planidium, is highly mobile to search out a host, while the following instars are more sedentary and remain on or within their host. This is known as hypermetamorphosis. It occurs in the Meloidae, Micromalthidae, and Rhipophoridae. 90. The blister beetle Epicota vittata, Meloidae, for example, has 3 distinct larval stages. Its first stage, the triungulin, has longer legs to go in search of the eggs of grasshoppers. After feeding for a week it molts to the second stage, called the caraboid stage, which resembles the larva of a carabid beetle. In another week it molts and assumes the appearance of a scarabaeid larva, the scarabaeidoid stage. Its penultimate larval stage is the pseudopupa or the corcate larva, which will overwinter and pupate until the next spring. 91. The larval period can vary widely. A fungus-feeding staphylinid Phaneroda fasciata undergoes 3 molts in 3.2 days at room temperature, while Anisotoma sp. Leiididae completes its larval stage in the fruiting body of slime mold in 2 days and possibly represents the fastest-growing beetles. Dermestid beetles, Trochoderma inclusum, can remain in an extended larval state under unfavorable conditions, even reducing their size between molts. A larva is reported to have survived for 3.5 years in an enclosed container. 8. Pupa and adult. The ivory-marked beetle, Eberia quadrigeminata, may live up to 40 years inside the hardwoods on which the larva feeds. As with all holometabolans, beetle larvae pupate, and from these pupae emerge fully formed, sexually mature adult beetles, or imagos. Pupae never have mandibles, they are eudecticous. In most pupae, the appendages are not attached to the body and are said to be exarrate. In a few beetles, Staphylinidae, Teleidae, etc. The appendages are fused with the body, termed as obtect pupae. 7. Adults have extremely variable lifespans, from weeks to years, depending on the species. 751. Some wood-boring beetles can have extremely long life cycles. It is believed that when furniture or house timbers are infested by beetle larvae, the timber already contained the larva when it was first sawn up. A birch bookcase 40 years old released adult Eberia quadrigeminata, Cerambicidae, while Buprestis orolenta and other Buprestid have been documented as emerging as much as 51 years after manufacture of wooden items. 92. Behavior. Locomotion. Photinus pyrolis, firefly, in flight. The elytra allow beetles to both fly and move through confined spaces, doing so by folding the delicate wings under the elytra while not flying, and folding their wings out just before takeoff. The unfolding and folding of the wings is operated by muscles attached to the wing base. As long as the tension on the radial and cubital veins remains, the wings remain straight. 8. Some beetle species, many Cetoniinae, some Scarabaeidae, Curculionidae and Buprestid, fly with the elytra closed, with the metathoracic wings extended under the lateral elytra margins. 93. The altitude reached by beetles in flight varies. One study investigating the flight altitude of the ladybird species Coccinella septempunctata and Harmonia axaretus using radar showed that, whilst the majority in flight over a single location were at 150 to 195 m above ground level, some reached altitudes of over 1100 m. 94. Many rove beetles have greatly reduced elytra, and while they are capable of flight, they most often move on the ground. Their soft bodies and strong abdominal muscles make them flexible, easily able to wriggle into small cracks. 95. Aquatic beetles use several techniques for retaining air beneath the water's surface. Diving beetles, Didicidae, hold air between the abdomen and the elytra when diving. Hydrophilidae have hairs on their undersurface that retain a layer of air against their bodies. Adult crawling water beetles use both their elytra and their hind coxae, the basal segment of the back legs, in air retention, while religic beetles simply carry an air bubble down with them whenever they dive. 96. Communication. Beetles have a variety of ways to communicate, including the use of pheromones. The mountain pine beetle emits a pheromone to attract other beetles to a tree. The mass of beetles are able to overcome the chemical defenses of the tree. After the tree's defenses have been exhausted, the beetles emit an anti-aggregation pheromone. This species can stridulate to communicate. 97. But others may use sound to defend themselves when attacked. 98. Parental care. A dung beetle rolling dung. Parental care is found in a few families, 99, of beetle, perhaps for protection against adverse conditions and predators. 8. The rove beetle Bleedius spectabilis lives in salt marshes, so the eggs and larvae are endangered by the rising tide. The maternal beetle patrols the eggs and larvae, burrowing to keep them from flooding and asphyxiating, and protects them from the predatory carabid beetle Dicerotrichus gustavi and from the parasitoidal wasp Baricnemus bleediator, which kills some 15% of the larvae. 100. Burying beetles are attentive parents, and participate in cooperative care and feeding of their offspring. Both parents work to bury small animal carcass to serve as a food resource for their young and build a brood chamber around it. The parents prepare the carcass and protect it from competitors and from early decomposition. After their eggs hatch, the parents keep the larvae clean of fungus and bacteria and help the larvae feed by regurgitating food for them. 101. Some dung beetles provide parental care, collecting herbivore dung and laying eggs within that food supply, an instance of mass provisioning. Some species do not leave after this stage, but remain to safeguard their offspring. 102. Most species of beetles do not display parental care behaviors after the eggs have been laid. 103. Subsociality, where females guard their offspring, is well documented in two families of Chrysomelidae, Cassidae and Chrysomelinae. 104, 105, 106, 107, 108. Eusociality. Eusociality involves cooperative brood care, including brood care of offspring from other individuals, overlapping generations within a colony of adults, and a division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive groups. 109. Few organisms outside Hymenoptera exhibit this behavior. The only beetle to do so is the weevil Austroplatypus incompertus. 110. This Australian species lives in horizontal networks of tunnels, in the heartwood of eucalyptus trees. It is one of more than 300 species of wood-boring ambrosia beetles which distribute the spores of ambrosia fungi. 111. The fungi grow in the beetles' tunnels, providing food for the beetles and their larvae. Female offspring remain in the tunnels and maintain the fungal growth, probably never reproducing. 111. 110. Cooperative brood care is also found in the best beetles Pachylidae, where the larvae feed on the semi-digested feces of the adults. 112. Feeding. Hycleus sp. Meloidae feeding on the petals of Ipomoea carnea. Beetles are able to exploit a wide diversity of food sources available in their many habitats. Some are omnivores, eating both plants and animals. Other beetles are highly specialized in their diet. Many species of leaf beetles, longhorn beetles, and weevils are very host-specific, feeding on only a single species of plant. Ground beetles and rogue beetles, Staphylinidae, among others, are primarily carnivorous and catch and consume many other arthropods and small prey, such as earthworms and snails. While most predatory beetles are generalists, a few species have more specific prey requirements or preferences. 113. In some species, digestive ability relies upon a symbiotic relationship with fungi. Some beetles have yeasts living their guts, including some yeasts previously undiscovered anywhere else. 114. Decaying organic matter is a primary diet for many species. This can range from dung, which is consumed by coprophagous species, such as certain scarab beetles in the Scarabaeidae, to dead animals, which are eaten by necrophagous species, such as the carrion beetles, Sylphidae. Some beetles found in dung and carrion are in fact predatory. These include members of the Hysteridae and Sylphidae, preying on the larvae of coprophagous and necrophagous insects. 115. Many beetles feed under bark. Some feed on wood while others feed on fungi growing on wood or leaf litter. Some beetles have special mycangia, structures for the transport of fungal spores. 116. Ecology. A camouflaged longhorn beetle, Ecirus daciceras. Anti-predator adaptations. Beetles, both adults and larvae, are the prey of many animal predators including mammals from bats to rodents, birds, lizards, amphibians, fishes, dragonflies, robberflies, reduvid bugs, ants, other beetles, and spiders. 117. 118. Beetles use a variety of anti-predator adaptations to defend themselves. These include camouflage and mimicry against predators that hunt by sight, toxicity, and defensive behavior. Camouflage. Camouflage is common and widespread among beetle families, especially those that feed on wood or vegetation, such as leaf beetles Chrysomelidae, which are often green, and weevils. In some species, sculpturing or various colored scales or hairs cause beetles such as the avocado weevil Hylepus apiatus to resemble bird dung or other inedible objects. 117. Many beetles that live in sandy environments blend in with the coloration of that substrate. 119. Mimicry and aposematism. Clitus arietis, Cerambicidae, a Batesian mimic of wasps. Some longhorn beetles, Cerambicidae, are effective Batesian mimics of wasps. Beetles may combine coloration with behavioral mimicry, acting like the wasps they already closely resemble. Many other beetles, including ladybirds, blister beetles, and lysid beetles secrete distasteful or toxic substances to make them unpalatable or poisonous, and are often aposematic, where brighter contrasting coloration warn off predators. Many beetles and other insects mimic these chemically protected species. 120. Blister beetles such as Hycleus have brilliant aposematic coloration, warning of their toxicity. The bloody-nosed beetle, Timarcha tenebracosa, defending itself by releasing a droplet of noxious red liquid, base of leg, on right. Chemical defense is important in some species, usually being advertised by bright aposematic colors. Some Tenebrionidae use their posture for releasing noxious chemicals to warn off predators. Chemical defenses may serve purposes other than just protection from vertebrates, such as protection from a wide range of microbes. Some species sequester chemicals from the plants they feed on, incorporating them into their own defenses. 119. Other species have special glands to produce deterrent chemicals. The defensive glands of carabid ground beetles produce a variety of hydrocarbons, aldehydes, phenols, quinones, esters, and acids released from an opening at the end of the abdomen. African carabid beetles, for example, Anthea, employ the same chemicals as ants, formic acid. 120. Bombardier beetles have well-developed pygidial glands that empty from the sides of the intersegment membranes between the 7th and 8th abdominal segments. The gland is made of two containing chambers, one for hydroquinones and hydrogen peroxide, the other holding hydrogen peroxide and catalase enzymes. These chemicals mix and result in an explosive ejection, reaching a temperature of around 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, with the breakdown of hydroquinone to hydrogen, oxygen, and quinone. The oxygen propels the noxious chemical spray as a jet that can be aimed accurately at predators. 8. Other defenses. Large ground-dwelling beetles such as Carabidae, the rhinoceros beetle and the longhorn beetles defend themselves using strong mandibles, or heavily sclerotized armored spines or horns to deter or fight off predators. 119. Many species of weevil that feed out in the open on leaves of plants react to attack by employing a drop-off reflex. Some combine it with thanatosis, in which they close up their appendages and play dead. 121. The click beetles, Elateridae, can suddenly catapult themselves out of danger by releasing the energy stored by a click mechanism, which consists of a stout spine on the prosternum and a matching groove in the mesosternum. 117. Some species startle an attacker by producing sounds through a process known as stridulation. 98. Parasitism. A few species of beetles are ectoparasitic on mammals. One such species, Platypsilus castorus, parasitizes beavers, Castor spp. This beetle lives as a parasite both as a larva and as an adult, feeding on epidermal tissue and possibly on skin secretions and wound exudates. They are strikingly flattened dorsoventrally, no doubt as an adaptation for slipping between the beaver's hairs. They are wingless and eyeless, as are many other ectoparasites. 122. Others are kleptoparasites of other invertebrates, such as the small hive beetle Ethina tumida, that infests honeybee nests. 123. While many species are parasitic inquilines or commensal in the nests of ants. 124. A few groups of beetles are primary parasitoids of other insects, feeding off of, and eventually killing their hosts. 125. Pollination. An Israeli copper flower chafer, Protetia cuprea ignicalis, on a crown daisy, Glebionus coronaria. Beetle-pollinated flowers are usually large, greenish or off-white in color, and heavily scented. Scents may be spicy, fruity, or similar to decaying organic material. Beetles were most likely the first insects to pollinate flowers. 126. Most beetle-pollinated flowers are flattened or dish-shaped, with pollen easily accessible, although they may include traps to keep the beetle longer. The plant's ovaries are usually well protected from the biting mouthparts of their pollinators. The beetle families that habitually pollinate flowers are the Buprestidae, Cantharidae, Cerambicidae, Claridae, Dermestidae, Lycidae, Melioridae, Mordelidae, Nitijulidae and Scarabaeidae. 127. Beetles may be particularly important in some parts of the world such as semi-arid areas of southern Africa and southern California, 128, and the montane grasslands of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. 129. Mutualism. 1. Adult ambrosia beetle burrows into wood and lays eggs, carrying fungal spores in its mycangia. 2. Larva feeds on fungus, which digests wood, removing toxins, to mutual benefit. 3. Larva pupates. Mutualism is well known in a few beetles, such as the ambrosia beetle, which partners with fungi to digest the wood of dead trees. The beetles excavate tunnels in dead trees in which they cultivate fungal gardens, their sole source of nutrition. After landing on a suitable tree, an ambrosia beetle excavates a tunnel in which it releases spores of its fungal symbiont. The fungus penetrates the plant's xylem tissue, digests it, and concentrates the nutrients on and near the surface of the beetle gallery, so the weevils and the fungus both benefit. The beetles cannot eat the wood due to toxins, and uses its relationship with fungi to help overcome the defenses of its host tree in order to provide nutrition for their larvae. 130. Chemically mediated by a bacterially produced polyunsaturated peroxide. 131. This mutualistic relationship between the beetle and the fungus is co-evolved. 130. 132. Tenebrionid beetle in the Thar Desert. Tolerance of extreme environments. The fog-stand beetle of the Namib Desert, Stenocara gracilis, is able to survive by collecting water from fog on its back. About 90%. Two. Larva feeds on fungus, which digests wood. 1. Adult ambrosia beetle burrows into wood and lays eggs, carrying fungal spores in its mycangia. 2. Larva feeds on fungus, which digests wood, removing toxins, to mutual benefit. 3. Larva pupates. Mutualism is well known in a few beetles, such as the ambrosia beetle, which partners with fungi to digest the wood of dead trees. The beetles excavate tunnels in dead trees in which they cultivate fungal gardens, their sole source of nutrition. After landing on a suitable tree, an ambrosia beetle excavates a tunnel in which it releases spores of its fungal symbiont. The fungus penetrates the plant's xylem tissue, digests it, and concentrates the nutrients on and near the surface of the beetle gallery, so the weevils and the fungus both benefit. The beetles cannot eat the wood due to toxins, and uses its relationship with fungi to help overcome the defenses of its host tree in order to provide nutrition for their larvae. 130. Chemically mediated by a bacterially produced polyunsaturated peroxide. 131. This mutualistic relationship between the beetle and the fungus is co-evolved. 130. 132. Tenebrionid beetle in the Thar Desert. Tolerance of extreme environments. The fog-stand beetle of the Namib Desert, Stenocara gracilis, is able to survive by collecting water from fog on its back. About 90% of beetle species enter a period of adult diapause, a quiet phase with reduced metabolism to tight unfavorable environmental conditions. Adult diapause is the most common form of diapause in Coleoptera. To endure the period without food, often lasting many months, adults prepare by accumulating reserves of lipids, glycogen, proteins and other substances needed for resistance to future hazardous changes of environmental conditions. This diapause is induced by signals heralding the arrival of the unfavorable season. Usually the cue is photoperiodic. Short decreasing day length serves as a signal of approaching winter and induces winter diapause, hibernation. 133. A study of hibernation in the Arctic beetle Pterostychus brevicornis showed that the body fat levels of adults were highest in autumn with the alimentary canal filled with food, but empty by the end of January. This loss of body fat was a gradual process, occurring in combination with dehydration. 134. All insects are poikilothermic. 135. So the ability of a few beetles to live in extreme environments depends on their resilience to unusually high or low temperatures. The bark beetle Pityogons chalcographus can survive -39 degrees Celsius whilst overwintering beneath tree bark. 136. The Alaskan beetle Cucugus clavips puniceus is able to withstand -58 degrees Celsius. Its larvae may survive -100 degrees Celsius. 137. At these low temperatures, the formation of ice crystals in internal fluids is the biggest threat to survival to beetles, but this is prevented through the production of antifreeze proteins that stop water molecules from grouping together. The low temperatures experienced by Cucugus clavips can be survived through their deliberate dehydration in conjunction with the antifreeze proteins. This concentrates the antifreezes several-fold. 138. The hemolymph of the mealworm beetle Tenebrio molitor contains several antifreeze proteins. 139. The Alaskan beetle Upus ceramboides can survive -60 degrees Celsius. Its cryoprotectants are xylominin, a molecule consisting of a sugar bound to a fatty acid, 140, and the sugar alcohol, 3-tol. 141. Conversely, desert-dwelling beetles are adapted to tolerate high temperatures. For example, the tenebrionid beetle Onomacris rugatapenis can withstand 50 degrees Celsius. 142. Tiger beetles in hot, sandy areas are often whitish, for example, Habrocelomorpha dorsalis, to reflect more heat than a darker color would. These beetles also exhibit behavioral adaptations to tolerate the heat. They are able to stand erect on their tarsi to hold their bodies away from the hot ground, seek shade, and turn to face the sun so that only the front parts of their heads are directly exposed. 143. The fogstand beetle of the Namib Desert, Stenocara gracilis, is able to collect water from fog, as its elytra have a textured surface combining hydrophilic, water-loving bumps and waxy, hydrophobic troughs. The beetle faces the early morning breeze, holding up its abdomen. Droplets condense on the elytra and run along ridges towards their mouthparts. Similar adaptations are found in several other Namib desert beetles such as Onomacris ungicularis. 144. Some terrestrial beetles that exploit shoreline and floodplain habitats have physiological adaptations for surviving floods. In the event of flooding, adult beetles may be mobile enough to move away from flooding, but larvae and pupa often cannot. Adults of Cicindela tagata are unable to survive immersion in water, but larvae are able to survive a prolonged period, up to 6 days, of anoxia during floods. Anoxia tolerance in the larva may have been sustained by switching to anaerobic metabolic pathways or by reducing metabolic rate. 145. Anoxia tolerance in the adult carabid beetle Pelophilia borealis was tested in laboratory conditions and it was found that they could survive a continuous period of up to 127 days in an atmosphere of 99.9% nitrogen at 0 degrees Celsius. 146. Migration. Many beetle species undertake annual mass movements which are termed as migrations. These include the pollen beetle Melagethus aeneus, 147, and many species of coccinellids. 148. These mass movements may also be opportunistic, in search of food, rather than seasonal. A 2008 study of an unusually large outbreak of mountain pine beetle Dendroctonus ponderosae in British Columbia found that beetles were capable of flying 30 to 110 km per day in densities of up to 18,600 beetles per hectare. 149. Scarabaei in hieroglyphs Gardiner, L1. In ancient cultures. A scarab in the Valley of the Kings. Several species of dung beetle, especially the sacred scarab, Scarabaeus sacer, were revered in ancient Egypt. 150. 151. The hieroglyphic image of the beetle may have had existential, fictional, or ontologic significance. 152. Images of the scarab in bone, ivory, stone, Egyptian faience, and precious metals are known from the 6th dynasty and up to the period of Roman rule. The scarab was of prime significance in the funerary cult of ancient Egypt. 153. The scarab was linked to Khepri, the god of the rising sun, from the supposed resemblance of the rolling of the dung ball by the beetle to the rolling of the sun by the god. 150. Some of ancient Egypt's neighbors adopted the scarab motif for seals of varying types. The best known of these are the Judine LMLK seals, where 8 of 21 designs contain scarab beetles, which were used exclusively to stamp impressions on storage jars during the reign of Hezekiah. 154. Beetles are mentioned as a symbol of the sun, as in ancient Egypt, in Plutarch's 1st century Moralia. 155. The Greek magical papyri of the 2nd century BC to the 5th century AD describe scarabs as an ingredient in a spell. 156. Pliny the Elder discusses beetles in his Natural History, 157, describing the stag beetle. Some insects, for the preservation of their wings, are covered with an arust elytra, the beetle, for instance, the wing of which is peculiarly fine and frail. To these insects a sting has been denied by nature, but in one large kind we find horns of a remarkable length, two-pronged at the extremities, and forming pincers, which the animal closes when it is its intention to bite. 158. 159. The stag beetle is recorded in a Greek myth by Nicander and recalled by Antoninus Liberalis in which Cerambicidae is turned into a beetle. He can be seen on trunks and has hooked teeth, ever moving his jaws together. He is black, long and has hard wings like a great dung beetle. 160. The story concludes with the relationship to humans. Comment that the beetles were used as toys by young boys, and that the head was removed and worn as a pendant. 159. 161. As pests. Cotton boll weevil. About 75% of beetle species are phytophagous in both the larval and adult stages. Many feed on economically important plants and stored plant products, including trees, cereals, tobacco, and dried fruits. 7. Some, such as the boll weevil, which feeds on cotton buds and flowers, can cause extremely serious damage to agriculture. The boll weevil crossed the Rio Grande near Brownsville, Texas, to enter the United States from Mexico around 1892, 162, and had reached southeastern Alabama by 1915. By the mid-1920s, it had entered all cotton-growing regions in the U.S., traveling 40 to 160 miles, 60-260 kilometers per year. It remains the most destructive cotton pest in North America. Mississippi State University has estimated, since the boll weevil entered the United States, it has cost cotton producers about $13 billion, and in recent times about $300 million per year. 162. The bark beetle, elm leaf beetle and the Asian longhorn beetle, Anoplophora glabrypenis, 163, are among the species that attack elm trees. Bark beetles, Scolidae, carry Dutch elm disease as they move from infected breeding sites to healthy trees. The disease has devastated elm trees across Europe and North America. 164. Larva of the Colorado potato beetle, Leptinotarsa disseminata, a serious crop pest. Some species of beetle have evolved immunity to insecticides. For example, the Colorado potato beetle, Leptinotarsa disseminata, is a destructive pest of potato plants. Its hosts include other members of the Solanaceae, such as nightshade, tomato, eggplant and capsicum, as well as the potato. Different populations have between them developed resistance to all major classes of insecticide. 165. The Colorado potato beetle was evaluated as a tool of entomological warfare during World War II, the idea being to use the beetle and its larvae to damage the crops of enemy nations. 166. Germany tested its Colorado potato beetle weaponization program south of Frankfurt, releasing 54,000 beetles. 167. The death watch beetle, Zestobium rufovillosum tinnidi, is a serious pest of older wooden buildings in Europe. It attacks hardwoods such as oak and chestnut, always where some fungal decay has taken or is taking place. The actual introduction of the pest into buildings is thought to take place at the time of construction. 168. Other pests include the coconut hispine beetle, Brontospia longissima, which feeds on young leaves, seedlings and mature coconut trees, causing serious economic damage in the Philippines. 169. The mountain pine beetle is a destructive pest of mature or weakened lodgepole pine, sometimes affecting large areas of Canada. 170. As beneficial resources. Coccinella septempunctata, a predatory beetle beneficial to agriculture. Beetles can be beneficial to human economics by controlling the populations of pests. The larvae and adults of some species of lady beetles, Coccinellidae, feed on aphids that are pests. Other lady beetles feed on scale insects, whitefly and mealybugs. 171. If normal food sources are scarce, they may feed on small caterpillars, young plant bugs, or honeydew and nectar. 172. Ground beetles, Carabidae, are common predators of many insect pests, including fly eggs, caterpillars, and wireworms. 173. Ground beetles can help to control weeds by eating their seeds in the soil, reducing the need for herbicides to protect crops. 174. The effectiveness of some species in reducing certain plant populations has resulted in the deliberate introduction of beetles in order to control weeds. For example, the genus Calligrapha is native to North America but has been used to control Parthenium hysterophorus in India and Ambrosia artemisifolia in Russia. 175. 176. Dung beetles, Scarabidae, have been successfully used to reduce the populations of pestilent flies, such as Muscovetustissima and Hematobia exigua, which are serious pests of cattle in Australia. 177. The beetles make the dung unavailable to breeding pests by quickly rolling and burying it in the soil, with the added effect of improving soil fertility, tilth, and nutrient cycling. 178. The Australian Dung Beetle Project, 1965-1985, introduced species of dung beetle to Australia from South Africa and Europe to reduce populations of Muscovetustissima, following successful trials of this technique in Hawaii. 177. The American Institute of Biological Sciences reports that dung beetles, such as Ioannidicellus intermedius, save the United States cattle industry an estimated $380 million United States dollars annually through burying above-ground livestock feces. 179. The dermestidae are often used in taxidermy and in the preparation of scientific specimens, to clean soft tissue from bones. 180. Larvae feed on and remove cartilage along with other soft tissue. 181. 182. As food and medicine. Mealworms in a bowl for human consumption. Beetles are the most widely eaten insects, with about 344 species used as food, usually at the larval stage. 183. The mealworm, the larva of the darkling beetle, and the rhinoceros beetle are among the species commonly eaten. 184. A wide range of species is also used in folk medicine to treat those suffering from a variety of disorders and illnesses, though this is done without clinical studies supporting the efficacy of such treatments. 185. As biodiversity indicators. Due to their habitat specificity, many species of beetles have been suggested as suitable as indicators, their presence, numbers, or absence providing a measure of habitat quality. Predatory beetles such as the tiger beetles, Cicindelidae, have found scientific use as an indicator taxon for measuring regional patterns of biodiversity. They are suitable for this as their taxonomy is stable, their life history is well described, they are large and simple to observe when visiting a site, they occur around the world in many habitats, with species specialized to particular habitats, and their occurrence by species accurately indicates other species, both vertebrate and invertebrate. 186. According to the habitats, many other groups such as the rove beetles in human-modified habitats, dung beetles in savannas, 187, and saproxylid beetles in forests, 188, have been suggested as potential indicator species. 189. In art and adornment. Zoopharidie in jewelry at the Texas A&M University Insect Collection. Pendant watch in shape of beetle, Switzerland 1850-1900 gold, diamond, enamel. Many beetles have durable elytra that has been used as material in art, with beetalooing the best example. 190. Sometimes, they are incorporated into ritual objects for their religious significance. Whole beetles, either as is or encased in clear plastic, are made into objects ranging from cheap souvenirs such as keychains to expensive fine art jewelry. In parts of Mexico, beetles of the genus Zoopharis are made into living brooches by attaching costume jewelry and golden chains, which is made possible by the incredibly hard elytra and sedentary habits of the genus. 191. In entertainment. Fighting beetles are used for entertainment and gambling. This sport exploits the territorial behavior and mating competition of certain species of large beetles. In the Chiang Mai district of northern Thailand, male Xylotrops rhinoceros beetles are caught in the wild and trained for fighting. Females are held inside a log to stimulate the fighting males with their pheromones. 192. These fights may be competitive and involve gambling both money and property. 193. In South Korea the Didicidae species Cybister tripunctatus is used in a roulette-like game. 194. Beetles are sometimes used as instruments. The Onabasulu of Papua New Guinea historically used the huga, weevil Rhynchophorus ferrugineus as a musical instrument by letting the human mouth serve as a variable resonance chamber for the wing vibrations of the live adult beetle. 193. As pets. Some species of beetle are kept as pets. For example, diving beetles, Didicidae, may be kept in a domestic freshwater tank. 195. Remarkable beetles found at Simunjan, Borneo. See a few of the 2,000 species of beetle collected by Alfred Russel Wallace in Borneo. In Japan the practice of keeping horned rhinoceros beetles, Dynastinae, and stag beetles, Lucanidae, is particularly popular amongst young boys. 196. Such is the popularity in Japan that vending machines dispensing live beetles were developed in 1999, each holding up to 100 stag beetles. 197. 198. As things to collect. Beetle collecting became extremely popular in the Victorian era. 199. The naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace collected, by his own count, a total of 83,200 beetles during the 8 years described in his 1869 book The Malay Archipelago, including 2,000 species new to science. 200. As inspiration for technologies. Several coleopteran adaptations have attracted interest in biomimetics with possible commercial applications. The bombardier beetle's powerful repellent spray has inspired the development of a fine mist spray technology, claimed to have a low carbon impact compared to aerosol sprays. 201. Moisture harvesting behavior by the Namib desert beetle, Stenocara gracilis, has inspired a self-filling water bottle which utilizes hydrophilic and hydrophobic materials to benefit people living in dry regions with no regular rainfall. 202. Living beetles have been used as cyborgs. A Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency-funded project implanted electrodes into Macunarina torquata beetles, allowing them to be remotely controlled via a radio receiver held on its back, as proof of concept for surveillance work. 203. Similar technology has been applied to enable a human operator to control the free flight steering and walking gaits of Macunarina torquata as well as graded turning, backward walking and feedback control of Zophobos morio. 204. 205. 206. 207. 208. Research published in 2020 sought to create a robotic camera backpack for beetles. Miniature cameras weighing 248 milligrams were attached to live beetles of the Tenebrionid genera Asbolus and Eleodes. The cameras filmed over a 60 degrees range for up to 6 hours. 209. 210. In conservation. Since beetles form such a large part of the world's biodiversity, their conservation is important, and equally, loss of habitat and biodiversity is essentially certain to impact on beetles. Many species of beetles have very specific habitats and long life cycles that make them vulnerable. Some species are highly threatened while others are already feared extinct. 211. Island species tend to be more susceptible as in the case of Helictoplerus undatus of Madagascar which is thought to have gone extinct during the late 20th century. 212. Conservationists have attempted to arouse a liking for beetles with flagship species like the stag beetle, Lucanus cervus, 213, and tiger beetles, Cicindelidae. In Japan the Genji firefly, Luciole cruciata, is extremely popular, and in South Africa the Addo elephant dung beetle offers promise for broadening ecotourism beyond the big five tourist mammal species. Popular dislike of pest beetles, too, can be turned into public interest in insects, as can unusual ecological adaptations of species like the fairy shrimp hunting beetle, Cicinus bruchi. 214. Notes. A. These count for mid and hind leg tarsal segments, such as 554. B. The wood-gnawing longhorn beetle genus Cerambix is named for him. C. The plate was labeled Neocerambix aeneas, Cladognathes tarandus, Diarus vercelitus, Ectatorhinus wallaceae, Megacreodes saundersii, Cyriopalpus wallaceae. See all. The Curculionidae are a family of weevils, commonly called snout beetles or true weevils. They are one of the largest animal families with 6,800 genera and 83,001 species described worldwide. They are the sister group to the family Brentidae. 2. A true weevil. They include the bark beetles as the subfamily Scalidinae, which are modified in shape in accordance with their wood-boring lifestyle. They do not much resemble other weevils, so they were traditionally considered a distinct family, Scalididae. The family also includes the ambrosia beetles, of which the present-day subfamily Platypodinae was formerly considered the distinct family Platypodidae. Adult Curculionidae can be recognized by the well-developed, downwards curved snout rostrum possessed by many species, though the rostrum is sometimes short, e.g. Entominae. 3-4. They have elbowed antennae that end in clubs, and the first antennal segment often fits into a groove in the side of the rostrum. 3-4. The body tends to be robust, convex, heavily sclerotized and covered in scales or bristles. 3. Curculionidae range in size from 1 to 35 m long, usually being 5 to 15 m long. 4. Most Curculionidae are sexually dimorphic with females, compared to males, having antennae positioned more basally and a longer, thinner rostrum. 4. True weevils and bark beetles. Challis cinctus, Panama. Scientific classification domain. Eukaryota kingdom. Animalia phylum. Arthropoda class. Insecta order. Coleoptera infraorder. Cucugiformia clade. Phytophaga superfamily. Curculionoidea family. Curculionidae. Larval Curculionidae are C-shaped and lightly sclerotized, with minute antennae, robust mandibles, 3, and no legs. 5. Most weevils feed on plants as larvae and adults, and they include important pests of cultivated plants that chew holes in fruits, nuts and other parts. 4. The long rostrum possessed by most adult weevils is used by females to help lay eggs, oviposit, inside plant tissue. 5. Some feed on rotten wood or bark, e.g. Cosinae and Cryptorhynchinae, and some are wood borers that feed on ambrosia fungi, Platypodinae and some Scelidonae. 3. Curculio-Elephas. Although pesticide resistance hasn't historically been an issue with these insects, recently a mutation was discovered in association with the voltage-gated sodium channel in the species Cedophilus zeme, indicating there is a lot to learn about how these insects adapt to changing environments. 6. Behavior. When disturbed, adult Curculionids often play dead by lying motionless on their backs. 4. Many species of weevils are common household and garden pests, but don't harm people, pets, or buildings. Their presence is more of a temporary nuisance, usually to plants and their fruits in their larval stage. In tropical areas they have larger effects, specifically several species in the genera Conotrachellus and Copterus. 7. Silus formicarius has been observed with an increased amount of inbreeding suppression than is normal for the average population of weevils, both intraspecific and interspecific. 8. Phylogeny and systematics. The phylogeny of the group is complex. With so many species, a spirited debate exists about the relationships between subfamilies and genera. A 1997 analysis attempted to construct a phylogeny based mainly on larval characteristics. 5. Recent work on the phylogenetic relationships in weevils mentions the two subfamily groups Atelognathus, short-nosed weevils, subfamily Entomonae, and Phanerognatha, long-nosed weevils, subfamilies of Curculionidae other than Entomonae, for the species of Curculionidae. 9. Almost 24 subfamilies are recognized by some authors even when merging those that are certainly invalid. Others, however, recognize a lesser number. The only subfamilies that are almost universally considered valid are the Beridinae, Cosinae, Curculionidae, Cyclaminae, Entomonae, Melitonae, Platypodinae, and Scelidonae. The various proposed taxonomic schemes typically recognize as many additional subfamilies again, but little agreement is seen between authorities about which. In particular, the delimitation of the Melitonae has proven difficult. The timeline for current and extant weevil speciation and diversification is consistent with the radiation of gymnosperms during the Mesozoic period. 10. Curculio, Scarabieiform larva. The subfamilies considered valid by at least some authors today: Bogoinae, sometimes in Melitonae. Beridinae. Brachycerinae, disputed. Coniderainae, sometimes in Beridinae. Cosinae. Cryptorhynchinae, sometimes in Curculionidae. Chonus tuberculosis, Curculionidae. The Curculionidae are a family of weevils, commonly called. The family Scarabaeidae, as currently defined, consists of over 35,000 species of beetles worldwide. They are often called scarabs or scarab beetles. The classification of this family has undergone significant change. Several groups formerly treated as subfamilies have been elevated to family rank, e.g., Bulboceratidae, Geotrupidae, Gluricidae, Glaphyridae, Hyposauridae, Occidaidae, and Pleocomidae, and some reduced to lower ranks. The subfamilies listed in this article are in accordance with those in Catalogue of Life 2023. 3. On this high-quality close-up, head anatomic details are well visible. Description. Sacred scarab in a cartouche of Thutmose III from Karnak Temple of Amun-Ra, Egypt. Scarabs are stout-bodied beetles, many with bright metallic colors, measuring between 1.5 and 160 mm, 0.059 and 6.3 in. They have distinctive, clubbed antennae composed of plates called lamellae that can be compressed into a ball or fanned out like leaves to sense odors. Many species are fossorial, with legs adapted for digging. In some groups males, and sometimes females, have prominent horns on the head and or pronotum to fight over mates or resources. 4. The largest fossil scarabaeid was Oryctoanthecus borealis with a length of 50 mm, 2.0 in. 5. A scarab beetle grub from Australia. The C-shaped larvae, called grubs, are pale yellow or white. Most adult beetles are nocturnal, although the flower chafers, Cetonianae, and many leaf chafers, Rutellinae, are active during the day. The grubs mostly live underground or under debris, so are not exposed to sunlight. Many scarabs are scavengers that recycle dung, carrion, or decaying plant material. 6. Others, such as the Japanese beetle, are plant eaters, wreaking havoc on various crops and vegetation. Some of the well-known beetles from the Scarabaeidae are Japanese beetles, dung beetles, June beetles, rose chafers, Australian, European, and North American, rhinoceros beetles, Hercules beetles and Goliath beetles. Several members of this family have structurally colored shells which act as left-handed circular polarizers. This was the first discovered example of circular polarization in nature. 7. Scarab beetle. Central European scarab beetles with some anatomical details. Edmund Reiter's Fauna Germanica, 1908. Scientific classification domain: Eukaryota kingdom, Animalia phylum, Arthropoda class, Insecta order, Coleoptera suborder, Polyphaga infraorder, Scarabaeiformia superfamily, Scarabaeoidea. Family: Scarabaeidae. Latreille, 1802. In ancient Egypt, the dung beetle now known as Scarabaeus sacer, formerly Atucus sacer, was revered as sacred. Egyptian amulets representing the sacred scarab beetles were traded throughout the Mediterranean world. 4. Ground beetle. Ground beetles are a large, cosmopolitan family of beetles, the Carabidae, with more than 40,000 species worldwide, around 2,000 of which are found in North America and 2,700 in Europe. 3. As of 2015, it is one of the 10 most species-rich animal families. They belong to the Adephagae. Members of the family are primarily carnivorous, but some members are herbivorous or omnivorous. 4. A crucifix ground beetle, Panageus crux major, got Charles Darwin into trouble in 1828. Lebia tricolor, genus Lebia, in the family of ground beetles, searching for prey. Description and ecology. Although their body shapes and coloring vary somewhat, most are shiny black or metallic and have ridged wing covers, elytra. The elytra are fused in some species, particularly the large Carabidae, rendering the beetles unable to fly. The species Mormolus phyllodes is known as violin beetle due to their peculiarly shaped elytra. All carabids except the quite primitive flange bombardier beetles Posinae have a groove on their foreleg tibi bearing a comb of hairs used for cleaning their antennae. 5. A Brachynes species typical bombardier beetle, Brachynenae, from North Carolina. Defensive secretions. Typical for the ancient beetle suborder Adephagae, to which they belong, they have paired pygidial glands in the lower back of the abdomen. These are well developed in ground beetles, and produce noxious or even caustic secretions used to deter would-be predators. In some, commonly known as bombardier beetles, these secretions are mixed with volatile compounds and ejected by a small combustion, producing a loud popping sound and a cloud of hot and acrid gas that can injure small mammals, such as shrews, and is liable to kill invertebrate predators outright. To humans, getting bombed by a bombardier beetle is a decidedly unpleasant experience. This ability has evolved independently twice, as it seems, in the flange bombardier beetles Posinae, which are among the most ancient ground beetles, and in the typical bombardier beetles Brachynenae, which are part of a more modern lineage. The anthenae, though, can mechanically squirt their defensive secretions for considerable distances and are able to aim with a startling degree of accuracy. In Afrikaans, they are known as oogpisters, eye-pissers. In one of the very few known cases of a vertebrate mimicking an arthropod, juvenile Heliobolus lugubrus lizards. Ground beetles. Temporal range. Golden ground beetle eating an earthworm in northern Germany. Scientific classification domain: Eukaryota kingdom, Animalia phylum, Arthropoda class, Insecta order, Coleoptera suborder, Adephagae unranked Geetophaga superfamily, Caraboidea. Family, Carabidae. Latreille, 1802. Are similar in color to the aposematic oogpister beetles, and move in a way that makes them look surprisingly similar to the insects at a casual glance. 6. A folk story claims that Charles Darwin once found himself on the receiving end of a bombardier beetle's attack, based on a passage in his autobiography. 7. 8. Darwin stated in a letter to Leonard Jennings that a beetle had attacked him on that occasion, but he did not know what kind. A Cycrus rostratus once squirted into my eye and gave me extreme pain, and I must tell you what happened to me on the banks of the Cam in my early entomological days. Under a piece of bark I found 2 carabi, I forget which, and caught one in each hand, when lo and behold I saw a sacred Panageus crux major. I could not bear to give up either of my carabi, and to lose Panageus was out of the question, so that in despair I gently seized one of the carabi between my teeth, when to my unspeakable disgust and pain the little inconsiderate beast squirted his acid down my throat and I lost both carabi and Panageus. 9. A Laphyra sp. Tiger beetle from Tanzania. Ecology. Common habitats are under the bark of trees, under logs, or among rocks too, or sand by the edge of ponds and rivers. Most species are carnivorous and actively hunt for any invertebrate prey they can overpower. 2. Some run swiftly to catch their prey. Tiger beetles, Cicindelinae, can sustain speeds of 9 km per hour, 5.6 miles per hour, 10. In relation to their body length they are among the fastest land animals on Earth. Unlike most Carabidae, which are nocturnal, the tiger beetles are active diurnal hunters and often brightly colored. They have large eyes and hunt by sight. Ground beetles of the species Promcognathus labissimus are specialized predators of the cyanide millipede Harpophae haydeniana, countering the hydrogen cyanide that makes these millipedes poisonous to most carnivores. Relationship with humans. As predators of invertebrates, including many pests, most ground beetles are considered beneficial organisms. The caterpillar hunters Calisoma are famous for their habit of devouring prey in quantity, eagerly feeding on tussock moth Lymantriidae caterpillars, processionary caterpillars Taumatopeidae, and woolly worms Arctiidae, which, due to their urticating hairs, are avoided by most insectivores. Large numbers of the forest caterpillar hunter, C. Sycophanta, native to Europe, were shipped to New England for biological control of the gypsy moth, Lymantria dispar, as early as 1905. A few species are nuisance pests. Zabras is one of the few herbivorous ground beetle genera, and on rare occasions Zabras tenebrioides, for example, occurs abundantly enough to cause some damage to grain crops. 11. Large species, usually the Carabidae, can become a nuisance if present in large numbers, particularly during outdoor activities such as camping. They void their defensive secretions when threatened, and in hiding among provisions, their presence may spoil food. Since ground beetles are generally reluctant or even unable to fly, mechanically blocking their potential routes of entry is usually easy. The use of insecticides specifically for carabid intrusion may lead to unfortunate side effects, such as the release of their secretions, so it generally is not a good idea unless the same applications are intended to exclude ants, parasites or other crawling pests. Especially in the 19th century and to a lesser extent today, their large size and conspicuous coloration, as well as the odd morphology of some, e.g. the libini, made many ground beetles a popular object of collection and study for professional and amateur coleopterologists. High prices were paid for rare and exotic specimens, and in the early to mid-19th century, a veritable beetle craze occurred in England. As mentioned above, Charles Darwin was an ardent collector of beetles when he was about 20 years old, to the extent that he would rather scour the countryside for rare specimens with William Darwin Fox, John Stevens Henslow, and Henry Thompson than to study theology as his father wanted him to do. In his autobiography, he fondly recalled his experiences with Licinus and Panagius, and wrote, "No poet ever felt more delight at seeing his first poem published than I did at seeing in Stevens' illustrations of British insects the magic words, captured by C. Darwin, ESQ. 8. Evolution and Systematics. The Edaphaga are documented since the end of the Permian, about 250 million years ago, Maya. Ground beetles evolved in the latter Triassic, having separated from their closest relatives by 200 Maya. The family diversified throughout the Jurassic, and the more advanced lineages, such as the Harpalinae, underwent a vigorous radiation starting in the Cretaceous. The closest living relatives of the ground beetles are the false ground beetles, Trachypatchidae, and the tiger beetles, Cicindelidae. They are sometimes even included in the Carabidae as subfamilies or as tribes Incertae, but more preferably they are united with the ground beetles in the superfamily Caraboidea, or Guidophaga. 12. Much research has been done on elucidating the phylogeny of the ground beetles and adjusting systematics and taxonomy accordingly. While no completely firm consensus exists, a few points are generally accepted. The ground beetles seemingly consist of a number of more basal lineages and the extremely diverse Harpalinae, which contain over half the described species and into which several formerly independent families had to be subsumed. 13. Subfamilies. The taxonomy used here is primarily based on the Catalogue of Life and the Carabidae database. Other classifications, while generally agreeing with the division into a basal radiation of more primitive lineages and the more advanced group informally called Carabidae conjunctae, 14, differ in details. For example, the system used by the Tree of Life web project makes little use of subfamilies, listing most tribes as Incertae as to subfamily. 15. Fauna Europaea, though, splits rather than lumps the Harpalinae, restricting them to what in the system used here is the tribe Harpalini. 16. The exclusion of Trachypatchidae as a separate family is now amply supported, as is the inclusion of Rhizodidae as a subfamily, closely related to Posinae and Syagoninae. 12. The exclusive Harpalinae is presented here, because the majority of authors presently use this system, following the Carabidae of the World, Catalogue of Palearctic Coleoptera, or the Carabidae database, 17, which is reflected the Catalogue of Life. 18. Tiger beetles have historically been treated as a subfamily of Carabidae under the name Cicindelinae, but several studies since 2020 indicated that they should be treated as a family, Cicindelidae, a sister group to Carabidae. 12. Anthony Bonelli, 1813. Ground beetle. Longhorn beetle. The longhorn beetles, Cerambicidae, also known as longhorned or longicorns, whose larvae are often referred to as round-headed borers, are a large family of beetles, with over 35,000 species described. 2. Most species are characterized by antennae as long as or longer than the beetle's body. A few species have short antennae, e.g., Neandrobrunia, making them difficult to distinguish from related families such as Chrysomelidae. Cerambicidae comes from a Greek mythological figure. After an argument with nymphs, the shepherd Cerambus is transformed into a large beetle with horns. Longhorn beetles are found on all continents except Antarctica. 3. Description. Other than the typical long antennal length, the most consistently distinctive feature of adults of this family is that the antennal sockets are located on low tubercles on the face. Other beetles with long antennae lack these tubercles, and Cerambicids with short antennae still possess them. They otherwise vary greatly in size, shape, sculpture, and coloration. A number of species mimic ants, bees, and wasps, though a majority of species are cryptically colored. The Titan beetle Titanus gigantus, from northeastern South America is often considered the largest insect, though not the heaviest, and not the longest including legs, with a maximum known body length of just over 16.7 centimeters, 6.6 in. 4. Larvae are 0.522 centimeters, 0.20-8.66 in, long, elongate in shape and lightly sclerotized. The prothorax is often enlarged and the sides of the body have lateral swellings, ampullae. The head is usually retracted into the prothorax and bears well sclerotized mouthparts. Larval legs range from moderately developed to absent. The spiracles are always annular. 5. The larva of the fig tree borer, Phrenetus spinator, has the shape typical of larva of Cerambicidae, straight and legless, termed oppidus eruciform, but on some of its segments it has swellings that aid in locomotion, especially in the tunnels it chews through wood. Eberia quadrageminata, the ivory-marked borer. Diet. All known longhorn beetle larvae feed on plant tissue such as stems, trunks, or roots of both herbaceous and woody plants, often in injured or weak trees. 6. A few species are serious pests. The larvae, called round-headed borers, bore into wood, where they can cause extensive damage to either living trees or untreated lumber, or, occasionally, to wood and buildings. The old house borer, Hylotrops bahulus, is a particular problem indoors. Many longhorns locate and recognize potential hosts by detecting chemical attractants, including monoterpenes, compounds released en masse by woody plants when stressed, ethanol, another compound emitted by damaged plant material, and even bark beetle pheromones. Many scalidin weevils share the Cerambicids niche of weakened or recently deceased trees. Thus, by locating Cerambicidae. Temporal range. Batis barbicornis. Scientific classification domain. Eukaryota kingdom. Animalia phylum. Arthropoda class. Insecta order. Coleoptera superfamily. Chrysomaloidea. Family, Cerambicidae. Latreille, 1802-1. Scalidinids, a suitable host can likely be located as well. The arrival of Cerambicid larvae is often detrimental to a population of scalidinids, as the Cerambicid larvae will typically either outcompete them with their greater size and mobility, or act as direct predators of them. This latter practice is less common, but has been observed in several species, notably Monocamus carolinensis. Cerambicids, in turn, have been found to play a role in attracting other wood borers to a host. 7. Borgmeister, et al., 1998, recorded that Cerambicid activity in girdled twigs released volatiles attractive to some bostrichids, especially Prostephanus truncatus. 8. A few Cerambicids, such as Auropolusp, are adapted to take advantage of trees recently killed or injured by forest fires by detecting and pursuing smoke volatiles. Adults of Laminae, most Leptiraceae and some Cerambicinae also feed. Adults of Perendrinae, Prionae and Spondylidinae do not feed. In those taxa with feeding adults, common foods are nectar, pollen, fruit and sap exudates. Some, mainly Laminae, feed on bark, plant stems, needles or developing cones. Roots are consumed by larvae and sometimes also adults of soil-dwelling Dorcadian. The genus Leiopis is known to feed on fungi. Lastly, the genus Elytroleptis is unusual in having carnivorous adults, which prey on lysid beetles. 9. Pollination. In addition to feeding on other plant tissue, some species feed on pollen or nectar and may act as pollinators. Assessing the efficacy of beetle pollinators is difficult. Even if pollination of one species by beetles is shown, that same beetle may also act as a flower predator toward other species. In some cases, beetles may act as both pollinators and predators on the same flowers. 10. Flowers specializing in pollination by beetles typically display a particular set of traits, but pollination by longhorn beetles is not limited to these cantharophilous flowers. A review of angiosperm pollination by beetles shows that Cerambicidae, along with Curculionidae and Scarabaeidae, contains many taxa that are pollinators for not only specialist but also generalist systems. 11. Beetles in the New Zealand genus Zorion are known to feed on pollen and have a specialized structure similar to that of pollen baskets found in bees. 12 species in this genus are thought to be important pollinator species for native plants such as Harucaceae. 13. Some orchid species have been found to be largely reliant on longhorn beetles for pollination. The species Alisterna tabasicolor was found to be the main pollinator of a rare orchid species, Dactylorhiza fuchsii, in Poland. 14. Another rare orchid, Disa forficaria, found in the Cape Floristic region in South Africa, relies on the species Cheirothese hesse for pollination. D. forficaria uses sexual deception targeting male C. hesse, possibly indicating a long history of coevolution with longhorn beetle pollinators. 15. Flower visiting species, Zorion guttigerum. The proportion of longhorn beetle species that act as pollinators is unknown. The fact that two species of longhorn species from distinct subfamilies, Leptiraceae and Cerambicinae, found on different continents both with significant roles as pollinators could suggest that some capacity for pollination may be common among longhorn beetles. Predators. Parasitoids. In North America, some native Cerambicids are the hosts of Onsera melipes, a parasitoid wasp in the family Braconidae. 16. O. melipes may be useful in controlling a forestry pest in this same family, Anoplophora glabripennis, that is invasive in North America. 16. Classification. Decora longicorn, Amphiorho decora. As with many large families, different authorities have tended to recognize many different subfamilies, or sometimes split subfamilies off as separate families entirely, e.g., Distenidae, Oxypeltidae, and Vesperidae. 17. There is thus some instability and controversy regarding the constituency of the Cerambicidae. 18. There are few truly defining features for the group as a whole, at least as adults, as there are occasional species or species groups which may lack any given feature. The family and its closest relatives, therefore, constitute a taxonomically difficult group, and relationships of the various lineages are still poorly understood. 19. The oldest unambiguous fossils of the family are Cretoprionis and Cenopraecipuus from Yixian Formation of Inner Mongolia and Liaoning, China, dating to the Aptian stage of the early Cretaceous, approximately 122 million years ago. The former genus was assigned to the subfamily Prionae in its original description, while the latter could not be placed in any extant subfamily. 2021 Kishiniu from the mid-Cretaceous Burmese amber of Myanmar, dating to approximately 100 million years ago, also could not be placed in any extant subfamily. 22. Guarania bassi. Anoplophora chinensis. Subfamilies. Leaf beetle. The insects of the beetle family Chrysomelidae are commonly known as leaf beetles, and include over 37,000, and probably at least 50,000, species in more than 2,500 genera, making up one of the largest and most commonly encountered of all beetle families. Numerous subfamilies are recognized, but the precise taxonomy and systematics are likely to change with ongoing research. Leaf beetles are partially recognizable by their tarsal formula, which appears to be 4-4-4, but is actually 5-5-5 as the fourth tarsal segment is very small and hidden by the third. 2. As with many taxa, no single character defines the Chrysomelidae. Instead, the family is delineated by a set of characters. 3. Some lineages are only distinguished with difficulty from longhorn beetles, family Cerambicidae, namely by the antennae not arising from frontal tubercles. Adult and larval leaf beetles feed on all sorts of plant tissue. Many are serious pests of cultivated plants, for example the Colorado potato beetle Leptinotarsa disseminata, the asparagus beetle Crioceras asparagi, the cereal leaf beetle Ulma melanopus, the mustard beetle Phaedon cochlearii, and various flea beetles, and a few act as vectors of plant diseases. Others are beneficial due to their use in biocontrol of invasive weeds. Some Chrysomelidae are conspicuously colored, typically in glossy yellow to red or metallic blue-green hues, and some, especially Cassidae, have spectacularly bizarre shapes. Thus, they are highly popular among insect collectors. Leaf beetle. Temporal range. Scarlet lily beetle Lilioceras lilii in Oxfordshire, UK. Scientific classification domain: Eukaryota kingdom, Animalia phylum, Arthropoda class, Insecta order, Coleoptera superfamily, Chrysomelidae family, Chrysomelidae. Latreille, 1802-1. Subfamilies. See text. Description. The imagos of leaf beetles are small to medium-sized, i.e. most species range from 1.0 to 18 mm in length, excluding appendages, with just a few larger species such as Alernus humilis, which reaches 35 mm. The bodies of most species are domed, and oval in dorsal view, though some are round or elongated, and they often possess a metallic luster or multiple colors. In most specimens, the antennae are notably shorter than head, thorax, and abdomen, i.e. not more than half their combined length. The second antennal segment is of normal size, which differentiates leaf beetles from the closely related longhorn beetles. In most species, the antennal segments are of a more or less equal shape. At most they gradually widen towards the tip, although some Gallerusinae in particular have modified segments, mainly in males. The first segment of the antenna in most cases is larger than the following ones. The pronotum of leaf beetles varies between species. In most, it is slightly to highly domed and trapezoidal to rounded squarish in dorsal view. In some subfamilies such as the Cassidae and to a lesser extent the Cryptocephalaenae, the head is covered by the pronotum and thus not visible from above. The first three sternites are not fused, instead being linked by mobile sutures. Most species possess wings, although the level of development and thus flight ability varies widely, including within a single species, and some are flightless with fused elytra. 4. Sagrinae leech, 1815 frog-legged beetle. Synedinae LeConte and Horn, 1883 sometimes considered a tribe of Eumolpinae until recently. The subfamily Bruchinae was considered a separate family, while two former subfamilies are presently considered families, Orsodacnydae and Megalopodidae. Other commonly recognized subfamilies have recently been grouped with other subfamilies, usually reducing them to tribal rank, e.g., the former Alticinae, Chlamyzinae, Clytrinae, and Hispinae. Synedinae LeConte and Horn, 1883 sometimes considered a tribe of Eumolpinae until recently. The subfamily Bruchinae was considered a separate family, while two former subfamilies are presently considered families, Orsodacnydae and Megalopodidae. Diet. Chrysomelidae in general are herbivorous. Adults mostly feed on leaves and flowers of angiosperm plants, while larval diets are diverse. 6. Bruchinae larvae are seed borers, usually in seeds of legumes. Many adults feed on pollen, not necessarily that of the larval host. 7. Some do not feed as adults. 8. Cassidae larvae may be leaf miners, many of the former Hispinae, stem borers, e.g. Astigmena, and external leaf feeders, e.g. Leptispa, Etiopalpa. 9. Chrysomelidae generally feed on leaves as adults and larvae, though some species feed on flowers instead. 10. Criocerinae larvae are usually leaf miners or feed externally on leaves. 9. Some species are gallers instead. 11. Eumolpinae larvae feed on roots. 9. Most Cryptocephalaenae larvae live and feed in leaf litter, making them detritivores, while a few feed on green leaves. 12. Some Cryptocephalaenae have larvae that live in ant nests, Myrmecophylae, where they feed on dead plant or even dead animal matter. 13. The semi-aquatic Donatiinae have larvae feeding on the sap of roots of aquatic plants. In addition to food, they also obtain oxygen this way, from the plant's intercellular spaces. Adults feed on leaves of aquatic plants. 14. Gallerusinae are quite varied, with larvae living in soil and feeding on rootlets, e.g. Olicophora, Serotoma, Diabrotica, mining leaves, some Monoxia, or feeding externally on plants, e.g. Arima, Galeruca, Galerucella. 9. Lamprosomatinae larvae feed on green plant parts or graze on bark. 15. Sagrinae larvae mostly form galls in stems of shrubs. 9. Though Macunidera balli instead feeds inside seed pods of Pandaria vines. 16. Adults feed on pollen. 17. Spilopyrenae larvae are external leaf feeders. 6. Synetinae larvae feed on roots, mainly of trees in cold north.